Tonight on Bridge City News, Prime Minister Trudeau announces an aid package for Canada's fish and seafood industry. Some provinces are beginning to lift COVID-19 restrictions, but the Prime Minister says it's too early to discuss so-called immunity passports as some other nations are. And the new North American Free Trade Deal is another step closer to taking effect, and Mexico says it will soon be sharing details on its plan to reopen automotive factories.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Paul Arthur.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. This morning, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a $62.5 million aid package to help the country's fish and seafood processors protect workers from COVID-19.
We're announcing $62.5 million to support fish and seafood processors through this crisis. As we fight COVID-19, people who work in fish and seafood processing plants across the country are playing a crucial role when it comes to getting food to our tables. This funding will help ensure that they can safely continue their important work. We're giving more money to processors so that they can purchase personal protective equipment for workers, adapt to health protocols, and support other social distancing measures. For example, fish processing plants could buy new equipment like freezers or storage space so that their product, food for Canadians, can stay good while they respond to a changing market. With this announcement, we're giving fish and seafood processors more resources to adapt to the many challenges brought on by the pandemic and, above all, keep workers safe. Our fish sector is interconnected, so these investments will also have a positive impact on fish harvesters.
Trudeau also spoke with provincial and territorial leaders last night about when and how to reopen the economy. He said it's too early to discuss so-called immunity passports for people who have recovered from COVID-19, as some provinces begin working towards easing their COVID-19 restrictions.
In the approach that we're taking very carefully around the provinces and across the country on looking at reopening, I don't believe that there are any of the plans that hinge on certain people or individuals being immune or having immune to COVID-19. The focus we have is on continuing to prevent spread through social distancing measures, through PPE in workplaces, through various measures of protecting Canadians as we move forward. There is still an awful lot of science being done on the idea of immunity on protections, which is why we've invested significant amounts of money in a new Canada immunity task force that will be examining these issues. But it is very clear that the science is not decided on whether or not having had COVID once prevents you from getting it again. We know it is something that we need to get clearer answers to.
Trudeau says until the science is clear on COVID-19 immunity, Canada will err on the side of caution. The 22 victims of last weekend's killing rampage in Nova Scotia were remembered at a virtual vigil viewed across the country last night as Canadians showed their support for the grieving province, including Nova Scotia's most famous athlete, along with musicians, actors, religious leaders, and politicians.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Across the country, Canadians stand united in our grief. And today, we join together in remembrance. A neighbor and a nurse, a teacher and a friend, a Mountie and a mother, friends, colleagues, and family. They represented the best of us, and they were taken from us far too soon. To everyone who lost a loved one, Canada is mourning with you. To the communities that are grieving, we are here for you. You are not alone. There are no words to describe your pain, no words that could bring back those who left us too soon. This senseless act of violence happened in places where home isn't just a name, it's a feeling. That feeling of knowing friends and family are just around the corner if you need anything. That feeling of growing up with people who've known you your whole life. And right now, to all Canadians, it feels like we knew the people we just lost.
I'd like to extend my condolences to all the family and friends affected by this tragedy, and as well to the family of Constable Heidi Stevenson from Cole Harbour, who sacrificed her life protecting others.
A beautiful performance I saw a couple of days ago, played by one of the victims, Emily Tuck, and she was a fiddler. So I thought I would unite myself to her performance and play this tune for all the souls that lost their lives.
Okay, so your contribution to the COVID kitchen party.
Harvey McLeod.
Wicked.
All right.
Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil stated that while the horrific event may change people, it cannot define Nova Scotians. Alberta's Chief Medical Health Officer says she is getting some angry pushback from people about the decision to cancel large summer events due to COVID-19. Dr. Dina Hinshaw says people have to understand that the coronavirus still poses a serious threat and will do so for months to come. She says hosting such events this summer could lead to explosive, far-reaching and deadly consequences. Alberta reported 297 new cases of COVID-19 yesterday for a total of 4,017. 5 more people have died, bringing that number up to 72. During a press conference yesterday on reclamation work beginning on abandoned oil well sites funded by a new injection of federal money, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was asked if he is considering a swifter transition to renewable energy and whether he would be discussing renewable green energy investment with American politicians. This drew a bit of rebuke from the Premier.
When you talk about the Green New Deal, listen, our focus is on getting people back to work in Alberta, not pie-in-the-sky ideological schemes. We are actually not trying to amplify, but to fight back against the political agenda of the Green left that has been trying to landlock Alberta energy. So we're not going to cooperate with the folks that are trying to shut down Canada's single largest subsector. You're talking here, I mean, that kind of question in the middle of an economic crisis from a Calgary-based media outlet really, frankly, throws me for a loop. Sounds like you're reporting for the Tyee or something. Here's the reality. Canada's oil and gas sector employs directly and indirectly 500,000 Canadians, has paid $380 billion to governments over the past 18 years, is by far our largest export industry. So no, we're not going to work with congressmen, the small minority in Congress that wants to pursue the ideological fantasy of shutting down the modern industrial economy. We will continue to support technology that helps us to perform better on an environmental point of view and tell our tremendous story about our environmental, social, and governance performance. But in that world, 20 years from now, when at least 70 million barrels of oil is being produced and consumed, we will be a major part of that supply. We will not abandon global energy markets to some of the world's worst regimes.
New Brunswick has announced the first steps of a 4-phase plan aimed at gradually reopening the province and easing restrictions put in place to contain COVID-19. Premier Blaine Higgs says effective immediately, certain low-risk outdoor contacts will be allowed, including limited play on golf courses and the opening of the spring fishing and hunting seasons. Higgs says 2 family units will also be allowed to interact as part of a so-called 2-family bubble, where 2 households would be able to mutually decide to include one another in their family unit, and physical distancing requirements would be dropped for them as long as it remains an exclusive relationship. The new North American free trade deal is now another step closer to taking effect. Yesterday, the U.S. announced it has finished the domestic housekeeping work called for in the agreement. That allows all 3 countries to go ahead with the creation of uniform regulations that will govern how the language of the deal is to be interpreted. Meanwhile, Mexico says it will announce details in the coming days of its plan to reopen automotive factories in conjunction with Canada and the U.S. The announcement comes 3 days after the U.S. government launched a campaign to get Mexico to reopen reopen plants, suggesting the supply chain of the North American Free Trade Zone could be permanently affected if they didn't. India is easing some measures of its stringent lockdown for 1.3 billion people. It is allowing neighborhood and standalone shops to reopen with restrictions such as social distancing and directing half of workers to wear face masks. This follows the resumption of manufacturing activities in rural areas last week. Recapping one of our top news stories, this morning, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a $62.5 million aid package to help the country's fish and seafood processors protect workers from COVID-19. And a look at weekend weather. It looks like our recent batch of mild weather will stay with us. Partly cloudy tonight with a low of 6, sunny tomorrow with a southwest wind gusting from 40 to 60, and a high of 17. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit global financial markets very hard, and many are wondering what will happen to their investments and pensions. Financial advisor Aaron Rustin joins us next to discuss what money may or may not have been lost during this pandemic. That interview is coming up next.